But there is something about your orientation, obviously, that I don't agree with, that I might find sometimes hard to put my finger on. Uh, your well, maybe we'll start with your Renaissance articles on the painting and the Renaissance, the Italian Renaissance. Uh, your well, if I was maybe to outline, try to surmise what you're saying, is that this is the peak of painting because it's philosophical, and because it embraces our classical and Christian heritage, and afterwards there's been a steady decline, because it became painting became less philosophical and forgot, or subdued the Christian and the classical heritage, and so we're in this situation where, and this mirrors a general decline, a general decadence, that's come over Western society. Would that be a fair summation?
In the articles on the Renaissance painting, yeah, and not only painting, but in the Renaissance, I've argued that there was an original Platonic impulse to the Renaissance, and there was also a dark side to the Renaissance. In that original impulse, Platonic impulse, which looked back to Dante, especially, as forefather, yeah. We have what we could call an enlightenment of the arts. The arts recognizing themselves as moved by a purely philosophical impulse. Whatever that may be, it is not obvious to us what philosophy or philosophical impulse might be, but it is clear that there is the Platonic element, whatever that may be. Again, this is all to be rediscovered, as it were, that comes to the fore. It is clear that they look upon Dante as a model for and a guide for the arts, for a recovery of something that had been at least partially lost, partially eclipsed, for whatever reason, and for a long time. I mean, we speak of Renaissance not for nothing, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well.
There's something that comes out to life, as it were.
Yeah. So what is being reborn here?
It is I would say that the purely philosophical impulse of man, an impulse that is naked prior to its being clothed with Christianity. It is,
yeah.
I mean, you could think of Socrates as opposed to a Socrates who is protected, who has already received his apology and is nihil obstat, from the Pope, as it were. But there is a kind of nakedness of man, that is, we only see a shadow of that in the news, but there is an actual nakedness of the human spirit that takes advantage of the Christian clothing to show itself for what it truly is, an heroic spirit, an heroic act, an heroic impulse that shows itself, that dares show itself, however, in a kind of penumbra, as I have suggested, and thus in what Dante refers to as a limbo. He has his heroes in limbo, and he himself, as I have argued, returns to this area where he is not showing himself, in his full dignity as a modern would do. So we have the modern movement, the Enlightenment, which has these new heroes, these new philosophers who do not need theological authority. They impose themselves at some point as their own authority. He is not going along with that. He is in a limbo.
Okay. So I suppose the ancients, Plato, and Aristotle, and all of them, they managed without this theological clothing.
Well, they didn't manage very well, huh? They didn't manage very well. I mean, Socrates was of course, he ended up the way he did. Aristotle ran away. Plato had his own difficulties. Cicero was.
Okay. Well, what I mean is, okay. Oh, so you think that
and Seneca and so forth.
You think that the theological clothing was a protection?
Well, it just so happened that Christianity gives its blessing to a philosophy that is open to the Christian, the biblical revelation, a philosophy that somehow supports the Bible, biblical morality, and the biblical God, who in turn blesses and confirms that philosophy. They confirm each other, as it were.
Well, and obviously, on a you might say superficial level, the theological, the Christian orthodoxy has a priority. The philosophy has to at least has to subordinate itself to it. The handmaiden of theology.
But this is not all that clear, as I have argued in various places, what that means. It doesn't mean, it should not mean, and it need not mean, at the very least, that the philosopher must be the jongleur, the king's fool for the theologian. It means that is to say, or the schoolman, or the priest. It means that philosophy, reason, human freedom points to a theological truth, which is to say, God. And therefore, philosophy is understood to be justified only in a Platonic dimension. So we have the philosophical bad boys, who are the Epicureans and the Stoics in the conventional language of shall we say, of the Middle Ages, but it goes on into the Baroque and so forth.
Plato was seen as the most consistent with Christian orthodoxy from Augustine. The Platonists were regarded as the best of the pre-Christian.
You know very well, yes, that some of the great Platonic philosophers of antiquity were most beloved throughout the Middle Ages. Some were sanctified virtually. I mean, that Virgil was considered a great Christian prophet by the early Christians. And not for nothing, Cicero, who wrote about providence, was read in côte à côte with the Bible, as it were, by monks throughout the Middle Ages, and they revered him. It is not only in the later Renaissance with Petrarch that we find this reverence for the classics.
So okay, but let's say in the Renaissance, what we do see, which sets it apart from the medieval era that preceded it, is you can paint classical themes, the birth of Venus,
in painting,
the rebirth in painting, yes.
Mm.
You can paint purely classical themes. You don't have to, you don't have to put it. You don't have to do a Christian. In the medieval era, it was entirely Christian themes. In the Renaissance, there's
Yes.
a more. It becomes more equal. What you see is,
you know what happens here.
I'll just mention this before you.
Yes.
It's visible even in Raphael's stanza della Signatura, where you have the school of Athens facing the disputation of the sacrament, and they're on an equal footing, right?
Yes.
They're on an equal footing. It's not that the Christian one isn't given automatic priority. It's not the basis. It's not the foundation, as it was in the medieval era, when Dante's writing, when Aquinas is writing, when Augustine's writing. But the point is, right, if we're returning to the origins, the primordial beginning of European civilization was not the Bible. The Bible comes late, and it comes arguably after the greatest achievements of the greatest flourishing of the European spirit, generally considered to happen in ancient Greece, happened without any input from the Bible. And in many ways,
yes and
the Bible is a foreign import. It's a Middle Eastern document. It's a great document. And there's another point about the Bible, I think, is that it's a pre-medieval document, right? So it existed prior to this medieval orthodoxy, prior to this theology that developed in the Middle Ages, and it can be read outside that. Or if you look at Josephus or whatever, there's no Jewish orthodoxy in this medieval sense. Josephus, he talks about the Sadducees who don't believe in an immortality, and the Pharisees who do, and they're both Jews. You don't have to subscribe to this particular orthodoxy in order to be considered a Jew at this stage. There's a debate, just as there was amongst the ancient philosophers, about big issues like whether the soul is immortal or not. Everyone can take different views. You don't have to agree with a particular Christian orthodoxy or anything. You can, so prior to the medieval era, you had this diversity of views. The Epicureans were acceptable, but you also had Plato. You weren't forced to sign up to any creed. The religion wasn't creedal, and it's the same then in the modern period. There's an aspect in which it's returning to the ancients, and the moderns have things in common with each other that set them apart from the medievals.
There is a sense in which, there is an important sense in which Western civilization is based, even in antiquity, classical antiquity, is based on biblical principles. And let me explain what I mean by this. And I'm saying this in a Platonic sense, because Platonists who accepted the Bible understood the Bible as being, and accepted and welcomed the Bible as being, and as standing for, a supreme vindication of Platonic insights. Is there a justice that transcends all power? Yes? Who is to say? The Bible, the Bible's God, Is there a way of life that is more noble for man, as man, is more noble than any pursuit of power, and that can, in fact, that does not need to be proven on the basis of evidence in this world in order to be justified? Well, yes, says Socrates, but who are you, Socrates? Yes, says the Bible. Early Platonists welcomed the Bible as confirming, as giving its blessing, as confirming with authority insights and, in fact, a way of life that had been competitive but not confirmed in classical antiquity. It had been attacked, especially from two sides, from the side of tyrants, from the side of, therefore, popular prejudice that goes together with tyranny, and from the side of, well, shall we say, apolitical, pre-Socratic philosophy that had not appreciated that impulse, that optimism, shall we say, that idealism, as we could loosely speak of it, proper of this Platonic way of life. This is not, therefore, the Bible is not really, this on account of Platonists who accept it and welcome it, is not introducing anything new. You say that in the Middle Ages we forgot about the pagans. I would say no. Okay, we forgot. Okay, I am paraphrasing, but it's sort of left behind, yeah, as it were. Well, we could understand this as, okay, you will correct my reading of what you said, but there is a kind of mask that is set up. Now, what is happening behind this formal mask, the painting as mask, you see, the gold, what is happening behind it? The saints who are recycled, you could say, recycled heroes from classical antiquity. So everybody's wearing a very formal mask. What happens? What is the purpose of this mask? Is the mask there to obliterate classical antiquity? Or is it there as a kind of room in which the classics are allowed to kind of remain in a limbo, as it were, and until the time is propitious for them to come out of the womb, of Mother Mary's womb, and to flourish wherever it is possible. We need cities for that. We cannot flourish, where there's barbaric tribes ravishing. There's an explosion. So we need a kind of good setting. Whenever the soil is ready, okay, yeah, they will come out.
Yeah. So there's a sense in which, people like Augustine saw that there was a kind of a crisis, and if civilization was going to survive against the barbarians, antiquity on its own would no longer suffice. So,
no, it would not. No, it would not. No. That is clear. What? No, it would not. It would not. It's clear.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying this is Augustin's position, that antiquity on its own would no longer suffice. So you had to embrace this new religion, and it became the mechanism by which civilization survived during the medieval period.
But it's not just for expedient means. I mean, as an expedient mean, it just so happens that this religion was vindicating the end of the Platonic life, the consummation. It stood for that consummation.
Well, you see, this is okay. Well, look, and then you see, one narrative then is, as you say, the time when Europe was no longer under threat, civilization was no longer under threat in such a direct way. It moved on, or it moved past that, and we get the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Romanticism.
But wait though, you're going too fast. You're going too fast, because in the Renaissance, the Platonic impulse is alive, and people recognize that you still need Christianity, you still need the authority, because without it, you would end up potentially in a worse situation than Socrates.
Well, okay, I suppose there's a couple of points. Is that to see people like Aquinas, there's a kind of a one strand in Christian thinking which sort of sees Plotinus as a kind of consummation of antiquity, and he then is sort of the philosopher that he's the Neoplatonist that the Christian Platonists are embracing. It's not Plato himself. It's this synthesis that Plotinus comes up with when antiquity is kind of exhausted, and it's not really Plato. It's a kind of
there are Platonic elements. There are Platonic elements.
Sure. But I mean, it's it's not a consummation. You see, it's not like this development with Plotinus and then Augustine going into the Middle Ages was a progress from what had gone before. It was a salvaging operation when you go into the Dark Ages, and you do your best with this narrowing. It's a narrowing of what people are allowed to think and discuss, and it's temporal. Like, in an even broader way of looking at it is that high civilization doesn't require theology. Where by theology we mean philosophy that takes place within the context of a authoritative orthodox religion. So we're talking about the Middle Ages and Christianity and Islam and Judaism as in China, in India, in Japan, and in ancient Europe and in modern Europe. None of this was necessary for high civilization to flourish. So,
what do you mean? What do you mean by that? Do you mean that there can be civilization without a religion?
No, I mean without creedal orthodox religion of the kind you have in the Middle Ages. Okay,
what's that? Obviously, you wouldn't have that in India.
What?
You wouldn't have that in India.
Well, what you have in India is Hinduism, which it's not a creedal religion. It's not saying you don't have to stand up and say you believe. It's a very diverse.
Okay.
You have the dualist. No, hang on. You have the dualist Hindus who believe in the immortality again. You have the non-dualist ones who believe in a kind of impersonal salvation. And there's a debate. And there's no, you don't have to, there's the polytheistic strands, there's the pantheistic strands, there's the monotheistic strands.
But you have strands in Europe.
It's still a religion. What? And it's still a religion.
You have strands in medieval Europe?
Yes, but they're severely, severely restricted.
I don't know. I mean, theological discussions are very broad. Theological discussion, you have enemies, you have, all kinds of theologians that are divergent.
There's a creed. We believe in, and then you have to and you have to accept that.
Okay,
it's not like that. It's not like that in Hinduism.
But this is not of the essence. Excuse me, but this is not of the essence. The creed is not of the essence. The letter that kills. I mean, come on. The creed can be very easily argued, and I think this was correct to say. The creed is there because we have a pagan Europe that has to be convinced to be unified under a biblical heading. Medieval schoolmen
during that period, yes, but you said yourself that they were waiting for a more what was the word, propitious time when that this restriction, this narrowing was no longer, and the Renaissance. I mean, the Renaissance it's a rebirth. It's not this is why it's a post-medieval development.
I don't know if it's so much post-medieval, frankly, because it is still, it's not giving away, it's not setting aside Christianity. It is simply showing that this is a mask, that it is a kind of Christianity, is a kind of womb that is not introducing new truths, but that is allowing old truths to flourish. Now, there is a new Machiavellian interpretation of the Renaissance, on account of which the mask is we have to get rid of. But this is a completely anti-Platonic position. For the Platonic Renaissance, we keep the mask, and Dante is a medieval man. Let us not forget.
Yes, no, he is. Yeah, I mean,
and he is the father of the Renaissance. Boccaccio, Boccaccio, you know Boccaccio, right? Boccaccio,
yeah, sure.
The most, liberal of men, and yet precisely he was very much at heart. He was a Dante scholar.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, okay, so let's just go back to Dante for a second here, and if we obviously he's one of the greatest poets of Western civilization. There's no disputing that. But we can see again, if we just look at the other great poets of Western civilization, Virgil and Homer and Plato, and Shakespeare, Goethe, Wagner. Those six people are.
Did you mention Wagner?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, this is maybe an interesting point because if you disagree with this selection, it might.
Goethe just had his foot in, but then barely, I think. But
anyway. I have a theory about this that we can go into. But okay, I suppose the point I'm going to make about them is that the six of them, the non-Dante six that I mentioned, are not Christian in their orientation. They're all pagans, or chiefly pagans. Goethe, you might, but I mean, obviously, Virgil.
Go tell early Christians who thought that Virgil was a Christian prophet.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they thought that. Okay, fair enough. They co-opted him. That's fine. But I mean, he wasn't. He was a pagan, right? And so is Shakespeare.
And so is the Bible.
And so is Wagner. Well, it's just to some extent, the Bible is a pre-medieval document that existed prior to. So it can actually be considered in that way. Yeah.
It is a question. It is a question for the Bible. I mean, to what extent is the Bible? How are we to understand biblical monotheism? Mm-hmm. Is the unity of the divine? I mean, if you look at Bereshit, so-called Genesis, where you have these expressions, we, God speaking in the, it's not a pluralis majestatis, he is in the plural, we, and so forth. You'll be like us, and so forth. To what extent does the early language of the Bible, how we are to understand its unity? Is it a unity that surpasses the plurality, that leaves it behind? Is it a unity that is sort of, in the Islamic sense, reveals itself as being at the beginning, and so we can erase everything that was in the middle? The pagan world is eliminated, or is it more than that? Or is it a kind of a unity that allows plurality to flourish somehow? I mean, this is, I'm just raising these questions not to answer them necessarily here, but I think that very often we assume that, okay, here is paganism with a plurality, and here is monotheism that has sort of shut everything down, and that's it.
Well, and there's this idea that the Jews were initially, worshipped one God, but they didn't necessarily think there was one God, and that this, which is, I agree. I'm not anti-Bible. If we go back to paganism, I think you call it the religion of the common man. Well, one streak in that, well, there's a couple of aspects I would see to this. It's the natural religion of the common man, I would agree. And what is it? You know, there is this polytheistic, you know, worship, that there are, the idea that there are many divine beings or semi-divine beings or spirits,
Many masters.
mortal, yeah, who are, yeah, supernatural or superhuman,
Many
superhuman.
masters. Many masters.
Okay, mini masters. Okay, yeah. So this is, you know, one aspect of it, which is, and then there's the other aspect which I think is there as well, which is a kind of a nature worship, or that nature is divine, pantheistic streak, you know, that's there. And but okay, now, so this is the common man, you know, especially in Northern Europe, perhaps, you know, in Ireland here with the sacred groves and all the rest of it. The religion of the common man, but in one sense, it's also the religion of the superior man, because this polytheism and this pantheism, which are modern terms that I'm just, you know, but these are very serious theological possibilities, arguably more rational and more philosophical than supernaturalist monotheism. And so,
Okay, even though, if I may say, yeah, because
yeah.
interject here, this question of nature. This is very often we project these notions, yeah, onto the ancients. Yeah, is there such a thing as a physical without a spiritual? Because nature is kind of means physis, yeah, the physical, and it sort of conceals divinities, hidden divinities. I think that, you know, once I gave a conference in Italy, yeah, and I was speaking about the distinction between Oriental religions and Christianity.
Mhm.
And I said that ultimately, what really is at stake, and I bring this out at the end of a recent article, what is ultimately at stake is this question about visibility. What is it that is ultimate? Is it what shows itself, or is
Mhm.
it what is concealed? And in traditional old, uh, yeah, I mean, non-Christ pagan religion, what is ultimately um, cared for is what is concealed. And this concealed nature of the divine does not, uh, because of a specific, shall we say, social political condition, does not have, does not even seem to require, in the minds of people, a vindication that is kind of risky. In what respect? In the respect that it may lead people to forget about the hiddenness of the divine and embrace the revelation as resolving the hiddenness of the divine within itself. Hence, a problem of legalism in religion, which could lead to a situation where you have a creed that counts more than, well, shall we say, piety as understood by the pagans. Okay, there is, you know that in all pagan religions you have small temples, you have all kinds of shrines that are even in the home, you have burials in the house, under the house you have the dead, your whole, there's the ancestors are important. Now with Christianity you tend, or in any case you wound up having this tendency of, well, somehow losing credibility for this type of religiosity in the name of what is revealed. However, and here is what I was emphasizing earlier, there is a Platonic reading of Christianity, and Dante stands for it, on account of which Christianity is not, going beyond and leaving behind pagan religion, but is somehow there to vindicate that which is ultimately genuine, ultimately sacred, ultimately defensible in pagan religiosity, in pagan piety. Okay? There is therefore this kind of reading of Christianity as a kind of supreme vindication. You see this throughout the whole comedy of Dante. The supreme vindication that is just waiting for us to recover what is best of classical antiquity and is there to vindicate it against the garbage.
Yeah. So let's bring in somebody who has a slightly different orientation, Shakespeare. There are a lot of
Question mark, Shakespeare.
supernatural. It's interesting to
Question
think of.
mark.
What? How do you mean?
It's a question mark. Shakespeare is a question mark. I don't know if he takes a different orientation.
Okay, well, look. Okay, first of all, let's on a superficial. If you look at the supernatural elements in his plays, it's it's witches, magicians, fairies, statues coming to life, and these and. But I mean, it's and what else is there? Ghosts, obviously. These are like pagan. It's the English pagan elements, supernatural elements. Yeah, and then obviously a lot of his work is very naturalistic as well. You could say. You could even have a humanist interpretation of it. Now, is that any way inferior to Dante? Do you need to have this? Again, the medieval architecture,
yeah. One might ask himself, in what setting are Shakespeare's plays set up? Is it a setting that do we take it? I mean, are we to assume that the setting that is not necessary, one does not even need to spell out? Yeah, is it not Christian?
No, well, okay. Well, you see, okay, you can say, oh, there's this Christian background somehow, but like obviously in Homer, which is, or in my friend Wagner, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. I know you take Nietzsche's side in the. Okay,
oh
okay.
No.
Okay, but in Homer, you can't argue that there's a Christian background. Like
in Homer, no.
Yeah.
No.
Like, go on then, argue it.
Yeah. No. There is no Christian background in
Shakespeare is closer, and you could, if you read Shakespeare and Dante, and if you read Shakespeare and compare him to Milton or Bunyan, people who have a genuinely Christian approach, the difference is evident. Of course, it happens after the Bible and after the medieval period, so that's a strand in the modern, in the post-medieval world, Christianity is it becomes one alternative. This Orthodox Christianity becomes one alternative. It becomes one brand. It becomes and then there's all these other alternatives: the classical, the humanist, the Enlightenment, the scientific. All these other options become real again, or become have their own integrity, and I don't know if you can say that the medieval approach is superior.
Look, I'm not quite sure.
To be honest with you, yeah.
I'm not quite sure that you see when they take there's a Machiavellian take on the Renaissance. Okay, there's a Machiavellian strand, and on account of Machiavelli, once you take off the mask, Machiavelli is aware that the alternatives that come out of the Pandora vase, as it were, are not the original ones. Okay? They would be unmanageable. So on Machiavelli's account, what does he do? What does he offer? He offers us a new management of these alternatives. The medieval Christian management of the alternatives he was familiar with. Yeah?
No.
He offers a new one. Modernity offers a new way to manage the pluralism. The pluralism is not that you have in the modern world, is not in the same situation as it was in ancient classical antiquity. We have moral residues from the Bible. He uses the Bible to establish a new, shall we say, framework, okay, for the pluralism. A new way to manage, in fact, a new world, to manage this pluralism. Ultimately, you could say that there is, in today's terms, it becomes obvious, there is a market that replaces Christianity. This market taken, so in other words, pluralism is reconceived on purely mercantile terms. So there's nothing sacred that is underpinning this pluralism. It is a game. There is a kind of absurdity of life that underpins this pluralism. Yes, as you pointed out, you see how nice it is. Look at authors such as Umberto Eco and other postmodernists for whom,
Well,
it's nice to have all kinds of things competing with each other, but it's just nice. It's beautiful. It can be fun. And there's nothing, what then one asks, what allows this pluralism to thrive without any position coming out as extremely aggressive and deciding that, it will be the dominant position in this game, that it will beat everyone else and be the new guide, the new Führer.
Yeah. So in
What allows
antiquity,
this? What allows this? And it has happened in Europe. It has happened in Europe, and it is happening now.
okay.
You see what is the problem here?
There's a few. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here now. If I'm going to get to where. Okay, I mean, the pluralism existed in antiquity without.
Yeah.
This is,
Tribalism. You could call it
yeah,
tribalism, ancient tribalism.
okay, but well,
Yeah.
uh,
There's no technology. There's no technology. There
yeah.
is no Christian high
Now,
biblical morality. It is tough to live in the ancient world, and the
yeah, oh yeah,
moderns do not want to do that. The moderns
oh yeah.
don't want
No,
to do
I
that.
agree. I agree. I'm not saying it's the same. I'm just saying that just speaking in terms of the pluralism, right? You can have the pluralism in. It's not just a modern phenomenon, right?
I wonder. What do you think? What do you think?
In the ancients that you are very obviously very pro ancient. That plurality is there as well. Yeah. And it's there. So I'm just saying on a very obvious level and yeah. Now on the Machiavelli, the relationship between Machiavelli and modernity. I go to say, he is a political thinker, sort of in the same vein, this realpolitik, this sort of cynical, hard-headed attitude to politics that you get in China, Sun Tzu, and so-called legalists. There's a guy in India, Chanchaka, I don't know how you pronounce it, but he's sort of the equivalent as well. Thucydides in the ancient world,
How can you compare Machiavelli to these people? I mean, Machiavelli is a progressive. He wants to solve problems. He wants to solve.
Hang on a second. He says in the, I think it's the History of Florence, is it that he comes forward with a very cyclical, non-progressive view of history, where he says that a nation rises and then it becomes decadent, and then it falls down again, and then it regains its mojo, and it becomes less delicate, and it goes on like this. And this
yes,
is
but this is just, you can't leave Machiavelli at that, because then he will
no,
go
no, I'm
further.
not.
He will, no, I'm just saying he will go further. That's just, he's saying you can intervene with
Yeah,
nature. Nature is blind, and so you can actually make use
yeah.
of this to step forward.
I don't even think.
There's a progressive strand.
Look, yeah, well, I don't see. I don't even think he's a philosopher. He doesn't.
Never mind that.
Quality
But
of a
there is a
philosopher.
progressive strand. He's not cyclical. He's not cyclical. He
Well, he
is.
is in the history of Florence. He's cyclical.
No,
This,
no, not
yeah,
him. I mean, what I'm suggesting is that he offers this. Yes, there is a cyclical element, but then he will intervene upon this cyclical nature, this cyclical nature that is cut off from God.
I don't think it's clear. I think a lot is read into him.
I know, but this, he obviously he wants to make use of the woman. He uses the woman nature, and he says,
Well,
you can.
Well, yeah, but I mean that kind of brutality is, in these cynical, real politiki type thinkers. This is not a new. And then, in the Bible you've got Joshua, going into Israel and killing everyone. Like it's not like this is. It's not like this is just that came out of nowhere. You find.
All right, but this is not Machiavelli. I mean, Machiavelli is acknowledging that there are problems.
Okay, well, look.
But
okay, well,
let's get to the other point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose. Look, if I say that I'm not convinced that he's a philosopher or
it's okay. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah, we've got the progress. Okay, we can agree that this progressive strand came into existence. Maybe not. Maybe we don't trace it to Machiavelli, but we say in the modern world, progressive elements came. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why did that happen? What was the source of it? Why did, after all this time, this progressive orientation emerge at this point? What was really going on, do you think? I can tell you what I think first, if you like.
You go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. What happened was science progressed. Okay, to such a level.
Why did science progress? What is science? What is science?
Yes. Okay. Here's a good. Yes. Okay. We'll get to that. Okay. Science progressed to a level where you had new technologies, which.
Why?
Yeah. Sure. Well, first of all, I'll go back to that. Okay. I'll go back to that. Why science progressed? Yes.
Why did you have technology to begin with?
Yeah. Because Well, why? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let's first of all state what happened. Science progressed. Technology progressed on the back of that, and this opened up the question of whether this could be used to improve people's lives in a material sense. That's what happened. Yeah.
Yes. Now, what?
Now, you say why? Why did science progress?
Yeah, because this is the real question.
Yeah. Now,
there is an idea, guiding idea.
Well,
science,
here's
technology.
The thing. Is it inherent in science to progress? Is that something that is just an add-on that it progresses, or is it something that's inherent to the idea of science, or something that's just part of its nature, that it grows, that it develops, right? Yeah.
Do we agree that it would be absurd to say that it is inherent in science?
Yeah. Well, if you start pursuing knowledge of nature and knowledge of well, let's start.
We don't even know what nature. What is meant by nature? We don't even know what it means. Yeah.
Okay. Let me put it to you from this angle, because is it? You were discussing, I think, in one of your other videos about how science knowledge is obviously not sufficient for. Well, what would you say? Wisdom.
To escape evil. This was the question. This was the question that I raised. Oh, actually, this is a question that knowledge and evil is an article that I should be
right.
coming up with soon. But okay,
So, yeah, okay. So the general point was it's not sufficient for, yeah, either say virtue or
all right.
morality. Yeah, and it's not sufficient for all sorts of other ways. Okay. Now, a philosopher, knowledge is not sufficient. A philosopher, is it possible? Okay, it's not sufficient, but is it necessary? Is it possible? It's questionable whether it's possible to be a philosopher and not love knowledge and not love
Oh, yes, of
science
course.
and mathematics. Yeah, yeah.
Of course, it's good. Of course, philosophy loves wisdom or knowledge or
No, no, no,
science.
no, 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 no. I'm going to make a distinction here. I'm going to talk about knowledge, right, as opposed
Yeah.
to wisdom.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's the same thing.
facts. No, no, facts. I'm talking
No, no, forget
about.
about your
No, no,
Machiavellian facts. You're
no, no, no.
too much of a Machiavellian for me.
Knowledge. No, no, knowledge.
Knowledge
Fact.
is
This is
scientia.
not
Scientia is sapientia. It's the same thing in classical antiquity and in medieval setting. It is the same thing. At best,
no,
at
hang on,
best
no,
in the
hang
Middle
on here,
Ages,
hang on
it
here.
could be at best.
Ancients have a
Yeah.
distinction between physics and ethics.
And
Yeah, well, so it's not like not natural science is what I'm
yes.
talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about natural science and formal science, mathematics, formal logic. Okay.
Okay. First of all, in Platonic terms, there is no such thing, yeah, as knowledge of nature. For human beings, we cannot have science of nature. It is poetic. It's the poetic enterprise. In other words, it works through
What about
metaphors.
Aristotle? Aristotle is not poetic.
Oh, Aristotle gives it a shot
He's
because
not poetic.
well,
So
what
yeah.
he gives it a shot, okay? He gives it a
Mhm.
shot because he says, okay, well, let us try to be, shall we say, to quantify the distance between the body and the mind. The world of minds is the world of ethics. The world of bodies is, physis. Let us try to quantify that distance, and that the distance between the two we could call the science of, well, biology, the study of life. And he realizes that it doesn't work. The classical tradition recognized that Aristotle realized that it doesn't work. It is really, shall we say, it's slippery. Yeah, it cannot be fulfilled or accomplished. It cannot. In fact, it is unattainable. Biology is impossible.
Well,
Thus understood. Because in its original idea, biology is this mediation between the physics, the body, and the world of the
yeah,
minds.
sure.
It is
And
impossible
this is what
to
he was all
measure.
about. Well, I mean, it's one
But
of
you
the
know
ways.
what he does? You know how he does it? He gives examples. It's very much in line with the classics, where this guy goes there. It's very commonsensical stuff. It is not a matter of charts or anything hyper scientific between, and scare quotes. It is not digitalized. He's giving you stories. This guy found that, I don't know, menstrual blood, this is what they say. And it looks like this is the reasonable way of understanding this, or the chicken and the egg. It's really amusing, actually, as a story by Plinius and these classical, either Roman stories about natural history, so to speak. They're, I don't think that, we are on the right track if we read them, if we read Aristotle as being a sort of a forefather of, I don't know, contemporary Oxford science. You know what I mean?
No, well, I do, but obviously he's not just concerned with.
He's not going there. He's not going there.
Well,
He's not. He's not a wannabe Hawkins.
no, he's not. But either are, either is Kant or Hegel. or any of the great modern philosophers. They all agree that natural science is not sufficient. There's not one of the major modern philosophers who thinks that science is sufficient for morality or for,
you mean science in the modern sense?
yeah, natural science. I mean,
Well,
this was when we're talking about modernity. What developed, what progress was natural science
okay.
and mathematical science. Yeah, so that's what I'm talking. This is the science that led to the new developments in the modern. So that's what I'm talking about here,
Okay.
right now.
Right.
None of the great modern philosophers,
all right, so
Kant and Hegel, science is the understanding, which is quite a low. Natural science is which is kind of a low down in their hierarchy of what they think, and I mean, and it's the same with any of them. Like none of the the top 10 modern philosophers, they're closer to Aristotle and Plato than they are to Stephen Hawking.
Okay, I have no qualms with that.
Yeah, okay. Well, so yeah, well, and then you see you can't. Well, yeah, okay. So what is the essential problem with modern philosophy if we say that it doesn't have this problem that you're talking about?
You raised the question of the progressive impulse, and you referred to technology developing. That's very nice, but technology does not develop just like that, yeah, because there was I don't know, there was water and air, and it sort of developed historically because of forces beyond human intention. And I mean, there is a guiding idea.
I inclined to disagree, because I think if men by nature decide to know and they start knowing, they don't just go, okay, now I know enough, we can stop here now, let's just be moderate.
It is a different kind of knowledge. No, but it's not. It is a different type of knowledge.
Okay. I would be very remain to be convinced that there's this decisive, massive difference between ancient natural science and modern natural science.
Yes, there is.
Science, natural science, mathematical science. The whole point of them, right, is that it's objective knowledge of nature, and it's universal. You don't have, Chinese science or Indian science. That it's universal, right? It's objective knowledge. And so it's not and it's trans-historical knowledge. It's not. So you don't go. It's
for whom? For whom?
Well, I mean, the idea of it is that it's trans-historical, objective.
Okay.
And of mathematics. It's not like if you understand, geometry. This is not a. This is, it's the same in any time and place. It's not a historically limited type thing. So it's trans-historical. You're getting beyond that. That's what science is. So.
Okay, but
and there's only one science. If I'm talking about it's mathematical science and natural science. Same everywhere, because nature is the same everywhere.
No. Yes. This is inadequate. I think this is inadequate. It is inadequate. There is no such thing as natural science for Socrates and the whole Platonic tradition in the Socratic sense. There is no such thing. The only dialogue that we have on so-called natural science in Plato is, the Timaeus. And the Timaeus is. And
I know it's science fiction. If you
it is as beautiful and more beautiful than Shakespeare's Tempest.
Okay.
The Tempest.
Well, it is an amazing work. Now, okay, that's Plato. I mean, obviously, if you look at the other ancients, it's very different. The pre-Socratics and Aristotle himself. This is Plato, one person, and he's the greatest. But this is not. You can't like they have an idea. The others have a different idea.
Wait. The ancients, fine.
Yeah.
The pre-Socratics, fine. Sure, we agree that there are divergences.
Okay.
Fine, but for example, there are divergences, and we could just pick up on some others from the Orient. It's okay. I would say the same things as far as the ones that I've studied and so forth. They all agree that if there is something to be learned about the nature of things, so what happens, the constitution of the world that we live in, the secret about the world we live in, our environment, is mysterious, and it is to be accessed only by the few who dare look into the abyss of our environment. It is mysterious, profoundly what we would call, I think we're fully justified in calling it mystical. The pre-Socratics are mystics. When they say fire, they don't mean fire in a plebeian sense. They mean something mystical. And even Democritus, when Democritus speaks about the void and atoms that cannot be separate because they're not in space. Okay, he is a mystic, and not for nothing, he despises, as a pre-Socratic, he despises ethics, he despises the common law, common religion, he despises all of that, and he wants to stay away from public prejudice against mystics. He has no intention of developing modern science. He wants to develop wisdom by plunging into the abyss of the environment of nature. And if he can grasp some light from there by turning to this abyss, then that's great. That's called progress for him. To be drenched in that light that only the mystics, only the few see. This is not modern science, and if there is progress, it has nothing to do with modern progress.
Well, okay.
It is not a collective effort.
Yeah. Well, you have, the thing about science is that you do have collective progress. Or unlike
modern.
Well,
Moderns. After Aristotle, you have had traces, and then with Christianity, you have had somehow the certain tendencies, certain strands of thought, the nominalism, the nominalists, and this has developed, was picked up, the nominalist tradition in the Middle Ages was picked up by the likes of Galileo, Machiavelli, who thought that we can abstract our knowledge so as to create a new type of progress. This is a complete revolution. Read Galileo and you will see how revolutionary he is. Read Vico and you will see how wrong Galileo was.
Okay, yeah, well, look, I think, I'm inclined to, okay, first of all, on the pre-Socratics, on their mysticism, that's true. They're philosophers, you see, so they're not just interested in natural science, or in mathematics, but they are, obviously, I mean, but that's just part of it. They, as you say, there's this transcendent, what's beyond appearances, and you've got Pythagoras's views, which are, and then you've got Parmenides, but it's the same, obviously, with modern philosophers. They don't think that science is natural science, or that mathematical science is exhaustive, and they think that they're except for that there's these other the other elements, such as divinity and morality and
yes, but
all of these are still things that they are concerned with. Yeah,
but it's not the same way. It is not the
Well,
same way, because they build on it. They build on nature. They build on it. It's progressive. You go from nature, the lowest point, and you move higher and higher and higher until you get to God or whatever the hell you want. But in their case, in the ancients' case, you don't start from low and you go further up. You start from, geez, a kind of confusion, if you like, and then there's nowhere to go. But why is there nowhere to go? We haven't had Christianity yet. We haven't had the Bible and so forth, medieval situation. There's nowhere to go upward. Why would you ever want to go upward? You're just diving. You explore, you dive. There's nowhere to go upward. There's no trust in the collective effort.
For who? For who?
Oh, for the natural, ancient natural scientists. Ancient natural philosophers. Let's not be confused about this. Scientist equal philosopher. So the ancient natural philosopher has no trust in collective efforts. He knows that he feels that most people, because of the human condition, most people are guided by passions, prejudices. There's no way you can have an education of the majority of people. Ultimately, he wants to be on his own.
Yeah, well, you see, the moderns also agree. All things excellent are as difficult as they are rare.
Yeah, but not the same way. Not the same way.
Yeah.
They think that the many can be manipulated into serving the scientific progress. Yeah. You just need to give them toys. You give them toys and they will feed into this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you think about if you go back to progress again, obviously, I would say there's been progress in science. You disagree, seemingly. I mean, okay, let's go to our would you disagree that there's been progress in natural science or mathematical science? Would you disagree with
not unqualified? No. All you need to do is, I'm not a Kuhnian, yeah, but even if you were, just read Kuhn and you start scratching your head, and then you go to Husserl and you realize that, hey, there is something like conceptual sedimentation, and there is such a thing, in fact, as forgetting what the sort of the shall we say, the conceptual history of contemporary scientific discourse. We don't know what the hell we're talking about when we say nature. What in the world do they mean by nature when they say, I don't know, space, time? And they want to build in sophistication. I will tell you that there has been progress in terms of sophistication. But sophistication, I could care less about. That is not scientific. Sophistication. They're very sophisticated. They're very sophisticated.
The opposite of sophistry is knowledge. There's been progress in scientific knowledge.
I disagree. There has been progress in, if you leave it like that, if you leave it at that, that is an unqualified statement. I would have to qualify that by saying there has been progress in scientific knowledge with respect to sophistication. Yes. Sophistication. Okay. Very sophisticated.
Yeah. Well,
we don't need more sophistication, I should tell you. We don't need to go, we need more sophistication to get to Mars, maybe. But we don't need to get to Mars to be better human beings, to live better, and to live with each other. We don't need to go to Mars. We don't need more sophistication. We don't need no more sophistication. We need less sophistication. Because you know what happens with sophistication?
Science is the opposite of. If you want to weed out the sophists, right? Give them a very hard. They do it in college courses if it's a serious university and they want to weed out the bluffers and the spoofers. All you need is a very difficult mathematical module, because if you're not really interested in knowing and learning, it's just boring. And you won't do it, and that's a way of counteracting sophistry.
I don't know about that either. Yeah. As I pointed out, this is obvious, yeah. In a recent debate there on YouTube, we have had the top executives of the Nazi Party, who were engineers, mathematicians, scientists
Yeah,
of all kinds. So obviously they were sophists, yeah, in the
yeah.
worst sense, and yet they were intellectual scientists. So I'm not sure that science saves us from evil. Okay?
Well, no, no, yeah, okay,
Huh?
okay, no,
Huh?
okay. Look, I'm making it more limited, but look, I agree that okay. Here's like art, morality, uh, philosophy, um, religion. These don't progress. You know, anyone who has a progressive view of those, I think, is mistaken. Okay, you know, at most there's, you know, you could say they're cyclical or
They're
you
types. There
know,
are types, yeah? There are types.
okay, any progress that happens there happens on an individual level. You know, it's up to yourself largely how much progress you make in these spheres. Uh, but science is different. You can't have collective progress in philosophy or in art. You can't have this. Yeah, you can't have it. It's not. It's an
Sure.
individual. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but in science, you can.
Yes, but that's by definition. It is by definition. This is begging the question. It is
But
almost, you're begging the question because it defines itself as that enterprise that is progressive. And what does it really mean? Because when philosophy looks at science, in other words, at that modification of philosophy that is still a kind of shadow of philosophy, when it looks at it, in other words, when the common man looks at this enterprise, it sees that it defines itself as essentially progressive. It is a progressive enterprise. And how do we understand this progress? And I must repeat it, we must understand it in fractal terms, in terms of sophistication. There is no um, Archimedean point that allows contemporary scientists to show common man that modern science has unqualified progress, has made unqualified progress. The only thing we can appeal to, modern contemporary scientists can appeal to, are toys.
that's
Only toys, bombs or otherwise.
you know
They're
that's
the only
the
things that they can appeal to. Sophistication is the only
it's the only
progress.
thing they can to people who aren't interested in theoretical science on an actual level.
Not
Obviously, the
very
only
theoretical, in fact, not very theoretical.
well,
You must also consider this. You must also consider this, Brian.
yeah.
I mean, if you're familiar with Jacob Klein's work, I think this is completely legitimate and completely reasonable, what he says and does and shows. Namely, that in order to have this progress, he's not the first one to do this, but in more recent times, he's spelled this out. In order to have this progressive discipline, you must uproot it from its earlier, should we say, its ancestors, its predecessors. Uproot it from the conditions of possibility in which its predecessors were rooted. And when you do this, you abstract mathematics from metaphysics. You end up with a new mathematics and a new notion of number, arithmos. Number is now somehow existing on its own, and it can be used to go and explore the universe and break the frontiers, and Star Trek-like discourse can appear.
Okay, well, you know, obviously, if you return to the very beginning of philosophy, to the first person who we know is called the philosopher Pythagoras, mathematics, and number, it's absolutely essential, right at the beginning, and
Rooted in metaphysics. Rooted in metaphysics.
absolutely, yeah, I agree. And then obviously in Plato, you know, let no one who is ignorant of geometry enter here. This is regarded not as a optional extra; it's essential.
Well, it's
Yeah,
between. It's between.
well,
Between. It is
yeah,
poetic.
uh, uh, yeah.
It is poetic. between the metaphysical and
they're metaphysical because
low.
they're philosophers, right? But the modern philosophers are also metaphysical. I mean, if you're a philosopher, well, you can have some philosophers who aren't metaphysical, but the great modern philosophers maybe Montaigne, but then Socrates, you could say himself, wasn't metaphysical. So philosophers are going to have a metaphysical. They're not going to just. They're not like. I agree that philosophers are not like natural scientists.
There is. Wait there, please. There's a distinction again to be drawn between the two sides. I agree with you that they're metaphysical, but in a new sense. In the classical sense, metaphysics for Aristotle just as part of, you could say is an element of physics. It just means after he wrote the Physis, then they had the metaphysica. Meta. Okay, fine. But of course, in the medieval terms, metaphysics deals with the being of everything. What is fundamental about everything. Now, for the moderns, metaphysics is a kind of superstructure. It is a kind of, look at Kant, it is conceptual.
Well, there's a broad variety. Yeah, it is. You're
not right. Not only Kant, but you have a kind of superstructure. It's not something fundamental. You try to get to
Descartes. It's first philosophy.
Descartes. Yes, but it's
because it's the root. Metaphysics is the root. Physics is the branch. or no, physics is the trunk. Mechanics and
the flower
and medicine and and morality. So he is metaphysical and metaphysical.
No, but this is not the same way.
And so is Spinoza.
Yeah, but this is all terrible. For the classics, this is terrible because they're just making a joke out of the classics. They're saying, okay, look at Spinoza. You mentioned Spinoza, fine. And so we know the essence of God. Now let's move forward. Okay, the essence of the mind of God. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, this is absurd. Yes, this is Spinoza.
The ultimate.
No, it's not. Yes, but
is
what?
Apprehend God, unity with God.
That
is the goal. There's nothing beyond that. And scientific progress is nowhere near, and he's not interested. He doesn't actually make, unlike Descartes or Leibniz, he doesn't make any contribution.
But Spinoza, look, Brian, does he not tell us at some point? And therefore, we have an adequate understanding of the essence of God. I'm paraphrasing closely. Okay, I'm paraphrasing.
No, the ultimate goal is contemplative love of God. He's
okay.
Totally
yes,
and he means it.
Yes, okay, but you can say the same thing for Kant. You can say the same thing for Kant.
No.
The sublime.
For Kant, it's God is a postulate of practice.
No. You're just changing. A name doesn't mean anything. What is God for Spinoza? It is natura naturans. It is this nature of nature. I mean, what is it for Kant? I mean, what is Kant going toward? What is the highest for Kant? The sublime? And what is the sublime? There's the noumenal reality. There's something deep.
We can't have
but
we can't have a consciousness of that.
But we have glimpse. Well,
we have
glimpse. Through the development of science, you can have glimpse through this development. So you have progress that will allow you.
Science is about the phenomena, not the noumena.
No, it is not enough.
Theoretical, yeah.
Yes, but this is precisely the rational. But there is something that transcends it, as you must acknowledge. For Kant, there's something that transcends the science of phenomena, of quantities.
Sure.
And you approach it, yes. And this awareness, there is a kind of awareness of this.
Here's the thing. Well, what you have is I suppose, if you like, three dimensions. theoretical reason, which is, science being the understanding, natural science being part of that. But obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. Yeah, there's the whole epistemological aspect, theoretical reason. Then you have practical reason, which is the ethical, and then you have judgment, which is aesthetic reasoning. Now, these are the three dimensions. Okay,
Typical.
which is yeah. Okay, yeah. Now he speaks clearly. Maybe you don't like that, and now. But what he doesn't have, what he rejects actually in the critique of pure reason, is any idea that you can have an intuition of the divine or of ultimate reality, that you can have a consciousness of it, and this is something that he attacks Descartes for thinking that you can actually have consciousness of something, metaphysical consciousness, right? And so he is a target, and other, but people like Descartes and Spinoza and Leibniz and Schopenhauer, the genuinely metaphysical modern philosophers, think that you can have metaphysical consciousness, and this is rejected by Kant.
Okay, I do not wish to open that can of worms now, because we would need to look at perhaps when it comes to these authors, you have to go on the field and look at passages but okay, I would just suggest that this is not of the essence, and that ultimately we do not.
For them, this is the fundamental debate. This is more important than you seem to think that they're all just Machiavelli. Like this is absurd in a way that they're all Machiavellians. They're not. Like he's nowhere compared to them.
What I'm suggesting is that let's not just go on too many people here, but if you stick to Spinoza, there is something that is decisively unmodern about him. There is something decisively unmodern about his understanding of human affairs, which he understands as grounded on apolitical, pre-political impulses, and fundamentally he sort of speaks of republics, and I will paraphrase here Vico's critique of Spinoza. He says he speaks about political things as if they were the business of merchants. Now, there is something of a decisive loss of the sacred in Spinoza's writings. When he speaks about traditional problems almost nonchalantly, without any really much commitment. He is very clinical about them. There's nothing remotely sacred about what he has to say about God. And he plays with medieval terms to advance his own cause. Now, is there some kind of a unity with the divine that he is driving at? Yes, no doubt that he is driving at something that is beyond quantity, beyond what we would call today modern scientists. But this something is closer to Nietzsche, no, I would say that it is close. It speaks in the language of joy, of liberty and joy. This is light years, and finally incompatible with the classical Platonic tradition, and he knew it. Now, if we disagree on this, we would have to go to the text, and then I'm fine with that. But it's just so that we understand that there's a disagreement on this point.
Look, he is, metaphysically speaking, he's a Parmenidean, like Spinoza, essentially.
He's using metaphysical language to move beyond it. This is what I can suggest.
No. You see, you can interpret any philosopher as an atheist if you want. You can say Plato.
I didn't say he's an atheist.
Okay,
I didn't say Spinoza is an atheist. I
Okay,
say that his understanding of the divine is incompatible with the classical Platonic tradition.
Well, he disagrees with the classic Platonism. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, he disagrees with Descartes. There's no doubt about that. He rejects he's a monist. He agrees with Parmenides. So he's
okay, but that's a different. He is a progressive, and he is inviting. His understanding of ultimate things, I would suggest here, is tied to his understanding, and in fact, his treatment of political things. Okay, and he treats political things in a novel manner. Don't try to distance him from Machiavelli, whom he calls acutissimus. He calls Machiavelli his teacher, and he calls him acutissimus, which means extremely, shall we say, cutting, with his mind. Sharp, very sharp.
He learns a lot from Machiavelli. And, Plato learned a lot from Pythagoras, or the sophists.
He did. I am not satisfied with that. No. There is. I mean, yes. It is not the same relation. It's not the same relation. Not the same relation.
Machiavelli is closer to Pythagoras or Thrasymachus or these people than he is to Spinoza. Now, I
disagree completely.
Yeah. Well, there you go. This is where we disagree, right? Because I think Spinoza is a genuine philosopher. He's not a sophist.
I didn't say he was.
Okay, well, he's a genuine philosopher. He's not, he is not a Machiavellian in that. Like, you see, what is it? There's Machiavellian brought to cosmic proportions. No. He transcends it completely.
Look, I mean, he doesn't say that. He doesn't say that.
Nietzsche, and he's not like Nietzsche either. Nietzsche and Machiavelli, they're on the same. They.
Okay, we're on the level of opinions here, because it doesn't really count. What we were trying to get at, it is perhaps good and interesting and fair to highlight that there's two distinct, shall we say, opinions about these authors, on account of some, and in fact of Spinoza's early modern critics. Spinoza had betrayed the whole philosophical tradition, Platonic, and had articulated a vision of political things that was deeply
that he was going against Christianity and Judaism, the orthodoxy. That's what they were reading.
Not only. His point was not that. His goal was not that. He was interested in destroying that tradition only insofar as it somehow was married to the Platonic tradition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And reinterpreted against that Platonic tradition. This is a reading. Then you have your reading. It's okay.
He was against Descartes. He was against. He thought his metaphysical approach was ridiculous.
Yes, but that's not for me. For me, that's not of the essence, because ultimately Descartes would, as far as I'm concerned, would have agreed with him.
Yeah. You see, this is because you think that all the things Descartes said about all his theories was just a bit of a. He didn't really believe it himself.
Look, there is Hillel Gildin. Hillel Gildin wrote a nice article in which he showed. But
you see, Marco. What happens here is the Straussians come along and they read Plato and they say the same. That all this stuff about the immortal soul, all of this is just You know, that really he's a closet Spinozist, if you like, or that
Yeah,
he's a
okay,
closet.
but
So, and then they do the same with Descartes. Now I say, don't do that. That's
no, I will not. I'm not satisfied with that. No,
and it's damaging, because then it's like everyone assumes that all philosophers agree and that there's no real alternatives.
we
And
cannot do. No. Let's not be radical. Look, there has been an early modern revolution. This early modern revolution was recognized and condemned, or
by
simply
medievalists,
no. Or by,
and yeah,
not only it has been, it was, there were warnings against it, not only condemned. So condemned, yes, by medievalists, but also there were warnings, philosophical warnings. Platonists who were warning against this new science and this new orientation, a progressive mode of life.
Who are you thinking of here?
In terms of the critics, well, you can go from, I'll give you three names. All right, three names. This is in the light of three big names, in the light of the developments that they've had. There's many others, but three prominent people. I'll give you one Neapolitan and
Vico, is that,
and one and two people who are close.
Irishman, I bet. Swift, one Irishman here.
Well, there you have it. And I'll give you
Lessing is the other one, is it?
No, I will give you another one. Give you another one. Vico definitely was a hardcore Socratic critic of the whole modern impulse, progressive impulse. Swift definitely, clearly, but somebody who comes a little bit later and who wrote about Dover. And who wrote a book about culture and anarchy.
Okay, yeah, Matthew Arnold. Well, yeah.
Huh? These are people who are deeply aware of the problems inherent in the whole progressive movement. There are others, but these are solid people.
Yeah.
These are solid people.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no, there's no, it's not a debatable point that there are people who oppose the
progressive movement.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. And today we have reached a point where progressivism fails to justify itself on any grounds other than sophistication and power. There are no other grounds. Power, gains, special effects, sophistication. All of this is the only ground for its self-justification or justification in general. Pragmatics, whatever you want to call it. It has failed completely on rational grounds.
Well,
bankruptcy, complete bankruptcy.
Yeah, well, no, look here.
Show me the otherwise. What? Show me that this is not true. I mean, it is. Where is scientists? I mean, they don't understand their own history of science.
I agree. That's yeah. No, I don't. I agree with modern philosophers that science is insufficient.
No, I mean, I'm just saying that it's bankrupt. I'm not a modern scientist at all. The modern scientists will say that you need it to go further.
Well, yeah. The progress. What? Okay, look, you disagree that there's been scientific progress. Let's just say there's been some kind of scientific developments.
Yes.
This has led. So the question that arises out of that is, has that, enabled political progress.
Oh,
Yeah,
we're doing just fine.
Yeah, what do you mean?
The world is doing just fine now. We're in a
All right.
global reset. We're just doing fine.
No, hang on. I'm just asking the question. I'm not. Yeah. So I mean, like this is a lot of people think it does enable political progress, right? And so at one extreme, you've got the Marx. It's useful to look at the extremes. The Marxist extreme, which is that it not only it has enabled progress, but that it will continue to, and that it's going to lead to some kind of utopia. This communist state. And then the alternative extreme view is that it's been a disaster.
Well,
the Nietzsche view, it's been a spiritual disaster, or a kind of in terms of it's actually made things worse.
Well, look,
this is Nietzsche and Heidegger, and
no, I wouldn't say it's altogether Nietzsche and Heidegger, because for them, yes, but to some extent only, because they're waiting for the new gods. It is a similar situation in the 30s. They're waiting for the new gods, and then out of this pluralism, which is petty pluralism, something to be despised, comes out the one party, the new gods. They will guide a new Renaissance. Huh?
They're anti-enlightenment.
Yeah, but I mean, the Enlightenment is anti-enlightenment.
Marxism is radical enlightenment. Nietzscheanism and its offshoots is anti-enlightenment.
But it kind of is. You could argue that it is the Enlightenment is anti-enlightenment. In other words, you could argue that there is something. There's an auto-destruction mode in the Enlightenment. There is the development that is asking for an explosion, and out of this explosion, this kind of coming face to face with itself in its loss of roots. There is a kind of catharsis, and in this respect, Nietzsche, he obviously speaks as a modern. Okay, he's a hyper modern. He's a modern gone berserk, you could say. But I mean, he's obsessed with the fundamental modern problem of the ego, the self, the liberation of the self. This is a fundamental, originally modern problem. How do we liberate the self? And he is really at the peak of this, and he says, ultimately we need a new heroism.
With Nietzsche, it's a decline. This is the beginning of the postmodern era, and with Marx and Nietzsche, you have a decline. This is not the pinnacle. It's like blaming the Dark Ages on Plato or something. It's like you can't say that this is Kant and Hegel and Descartes and that these are responsible for...
No, I'm just saying that Nietzsche is the early modern man who looks at himself in the mirror and who proclaims something that was sort of left in the dark by early modern optimism. There is something dark about early modern optimism, something left in the dark. As I had pointed out in various writings as well, I mean, there is a kind of there's a limelight, there's something very shiny, a shiny facade to the Enlightenment. But a lot is left in the dark. And we know this in terms of, for example, people speak about the hypocrisy of, even let's go back to Kant, Kant speaking about universality and this and that. And then he is justifying colonialism and enslavement of people. Okay, there's a kind of dark side to these people. The people who are always very precise, in very exact in everything they do, except for the fact that there's guess what? There's a Mr. Hyde.
Sure, yeah.
Huh? There's a Mr. Hyde. There is a dark side to the bright. Even the Nazi had a bright side.
Mm-hmm. Well, look, there's always a crisis, there's always a problem, there's always a disaster.
Except except we have
Oh,
now, a technological sophistication that enables tyrants to impose tyranny globally through an extreme mediation and disintegration, first of all, of human relations, and mediation, not only masks that are imposed on people
this is one
physically.
narrative. This is one narrative.
No, it's not just a narrative, however,
Yeah,
it is a
there's
reality.
counter-narrative.
We live
Counter-narrative.
this.
A lot of people don't agree. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, but
A lot of people think.
I mean, no, who will disagree? Who will disagree, Brian, that there is a lot of mediation that never existed before? Is something
No, what I mean is
unprecedented.
in an overall sense, right? That as a result of this scientific development,
Yes.
you've improved people's lives in a material sense,
No.
in a basic ways. Infant mortality declining and higher life expectancy.
There's more people.
And there's more people. Okay.
For now.
I don't know. I don't know if that's yeah. And also, it enabled the abolition of
Of what?
slavery.
Where is the abolition of slavery? That's an hypocrisy.
I said chattel slavery.
Of what?
And chattel slavery. Is that the pronunciation?
I am, but that's it. Look. We know perfectly well that the slavery that is in place today is worse than anything that was ever happened before. Yes.
Employment is worse.
No, I'm not speaking about employment. That's ridiculous. I'm speaking about millions of people who are being enslaved, sex slave trade, children being, millions of people, hundreds of millions of people, for all I know, that are being involved in these slave trades. I don't mean cheap labor.
Prior to modernity, this was less of a problem.
I say that it was less of a problem for a very simple reason. Life was less mediated. Wherever you have an excess of mediation in human relations, you can have more lies, okay? More treachery, more cunning. Basically, the knave is at home, whereas innocent, honest people have a hard time detecting the villain, and the villain hides more easily. It's a fact of life.
I don't know if
wherever mediation, you understand me? Mediation. You know what happens? You know the are you familiar with the gattopardo, the leopard?
Right. Oh yeah. I'm
okay.
Read it,
okay, fine.
The novel.
Yes. Well, they also have a film by Visconti. Okay. Now, you understand that the big problem there is precisely
just mention
what I said.
That I'm going to have to finish up in maybe the next 5 to 10 minutes.
We don't want to spend the whole night here. But yes, you see that for the Lampedusa, the big problem was that in earlier times you had relation between the master and the servant, and the servant knew the master. There was a kind of blood tie, and there was a recognition of authority. I know the master, and I know when he's acting bad and who is bad and who is good. And the whole community recognizes this. But in the new society that comes into place now, it is a society of merchants, of Philistines, a society in which you cannot discern where the villain is. It's harder to discern if it's a king or a tyrant. You see, if the blood tie is lost, there's shamelessness.
I'm not convinced that there wasn't always shamelessness, or that.
Yes, but you were tied.
That it's worse now. That there hasn't been a liberating aspect to to these developments.
Yeah, what liberation? Everybody's on the internet looking at virtual worlds.
Everybody, look,
They destroyed communities, Brian. Destroyed nations. Destroyed nations, destroyed communities, destroyed education. What is schools?
Like, what, you think this didn't happen before?
No, not like this. No, it would be ridiculous to assume. I mean, look at the level of corruption that you have in the 1800s.
You think there was less corruption? There was orgies in the Vatican. Yeah, I mean,
nothing like what you have today in the Vatican.
No, it's the same.
No.
If anything, it's better now because people know about it.
No, nobody knows nothing. You have the internet.
It's not more corrupt.
No. Look, Brian, please. The internet, you know that the internet has, when they speak about deep state, and the internet has layers. And it turns out that there is a dark net. And the dark net.
Look, every time maybe this newest technology is the disastrous one, but I mean, every time a new one comes along, the prophets of doom come along, the Cassandras come along, the end is nigh, and we don't know.
Look, I'm not against toys.
Yeah.
I'm not against toys. Let's be clear. But when you have children, Brian, you give them some toys, right? You don't want to fill the house with toys, millions of toys. What happens? What happens when you fill up the house with toys?
Yeah.
Are you helping them or you're not helping them?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. We have a problem today. We have a big problem. A big problem.
There's always problems.
No. I don't mean.
And some people react with hysteria.
I'm not hysterical.
I'm not sure that
I'm warning that there is a big unprecedented problem. This incredible mediation that there is in all relationships. This move towards virtuality. This move towards illusion. It's an anti-Platonic move. Instead of moving towards depths.
There's a liberating aspect to like anytime a new technology comes along, it's the worst ever, and this is it now. And it turns out to, in general, to be even more liberating than the reverse. So you have, the progress in,
in what? In bombs.
Sorry?
In bombs. You have bigger guns, okay, but so what? I'm not. Look, we speak to speak as a common man who is disillusioned vis-a-vis all this stuff. I mean, what do we really care about in life? What do we really care about? What is the most important thing? And what is the best way to vindicate that which is most important to us? What is the best way to bear witness to that which is most important?
Yeah.
And I think that we have lost track of that without being a romantic.
No, but yeah, I don't think, you see, I think it's only ever, these things are difficult and they're excellent and they're rare, and it's only ever a small amount of people who make good progress. And just as, I'm here in Ireland, which kind of moved from being a pre-modern country to a post-modern country, skipping the industrialization. And I can tell you, the pre-modern Ireland was shit, and everyone knows it. And I think, is there an aspect of people who
was there nothing good that has been eclipsed?
Oh, look, no, I think there's always, I mean, there's always.
Was there I'm interested in what was good that was eclipsed. Because on the Platonic reading of Christianity, Christianity is there to vindicate that which was good and that was made dirty. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think community and family and tradition. These are things that the weakness of simplistic liberalism. But again, you find this is a problem identified by Rousseau, and then what is the best solution that has been proposed to it? I think it's in Kant and Hegel. Yeah, they you have to have they respect community and tradition and institution. They're not
transplanted. Thank you. No.
Okay. Well, you think there's a better solution?
Yes.
Like I think. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think.
First of all, I'm for no solution. I want no solution.
Okay, not a solution, a way of managing it. Yeah.
Yes.
If you had if Plato and Aristotle were with us today, I think they would be not a million miles away from what Kant and Hegel were doing, and I think that there's a lot of continuity between the way they think about these things. So I don't think there's this huge chasm between them as their approach to politics or indeed philosophy. You avoid hysteria. You take a moderate position. You don't.
Yes, that's lovely. Moderation is great. However,
in politics in particular.
However, there is also a politics of appeasement that Churchill would not have readily agreed with, if you know what I mean. And I think he was right. And I think he was right not to agree with it.
He was, but obviously, but I mean, it was the Hitlers and the Stalins who were the extremists who and everything was a disaster and the world is going to the dogs and we need to do something really dramatic. Be careful. A lot of the people yelping about tyrants, it's like the guy who came out and killed Lincoln. Didn't he say, down with tyrants as he was doing it?
But isn't Brian?
Just because somebody's ranting about tyranny, and
isn't this? Yes, but isn't this precisely what you were somehow, mocking, justly, fairly enough? Isn't this precisely what the current globalist regime stands for? In other words, isn't it a radical regime that opposes, defames, condemns, and at the very least ostracizes any serious doubt raised against it? For the regime, that doubt is at best absurd, at best. And it submerges it with a lot of manure, which is what makes up the quasi-totality of the internet. That is why communities are destroyed. The communities are destroyed because you know perfectly well that your family is extremely vulnerable when everybody is apart.
Okay, well, look,
I'm not very optimistic about it, and yet I'm completely dispassionate. Why? But still, I am a man, and I recognize that something extremely important has been eclipsed, and something very vile about man, the lowest in man, has been raised and sort of decorated. Makeup has been spread all over it so that it looks great and it looks like a new ideal to strive for.
It was ever thus, but I think we're going to have to leave it there, Marco. I don't know. Do we need to make any final comments? I don't suppose so. We'll just.
No,
I enjoy talking to you.
As Socratic dialogues, they're open into the infinity.